If I could go back in time and save myself from narcissistic abuse, I would. The experience was so painful that I would never choose to go through it again. However, since it did happen, I had to make the most of it and use it to create a better life than I had before. Although I wouldn't willingly go through it again, I'm glad it happened because my life is better now in many ways. It might not look better from the outside and might not feel great on a superficial level, but inside, it feels so good, deeply happy and grounded. Before, things might have looked great from the outside and felt great on a superficial level, but deep down, I felt really bad. I was running away from that feeling, knowing that things were not as they should be, but the society was validating me and praising me for that false life. Before the collapse, if I'm being honest with myself, I felt like I was heading for a cliff for many years. I was happy and joyful, but it was an anxious kind of joy. I was caught up in self-created busyness, like I was constantly running away from something. One of those things was the feeling that I didn't belong in the world. I made myself fit in, and be accepted, but since childhood, I had seen how cruel and narcissistic the world was, not just some individuals, but the societal norms themselves. Because no one talked about it or acknowledged it, and everyone seemed to think the same way, I thought there was something wrong with me. So, I started to deny what I saw. The only thing that kept me going and surviving was the belief that one day I would find a place where people were different, kinder, and more human. If I'm being honest, and it took me a long time to acknowledge this, people always terrified me, and for a very good reason. They were manipulative and cruel, and it seemed like everyone was like that. The kind people, the ones I felt good around, were often bullied by the normal people and pushed out of groups. They were seen as too boring and there was nothing to talk about with them because they wouldn't engage in gossiping, judging, and scapegoating. In a narcissistic world powered by these behaviors, they had no value. I knew I was one of them, but I didn't want to be rejected, ostracized, and banished like they were, abandoned and not belonging. Seeing that I was more like these outliers, truly human in my eyes, but treated badly by ordinary people, I mimicked the normal people. I had to become cruel like them to survive. In my heart, I knew it didn't feel good and wasn't right, but I mimicked those who were considered good, decent, righteous, godly, cool, and likable, even though I saw they weren't really like that. They appeared to embody these traits, but they didn't. Everyone else agreed with this false image, so I thought I was the problem. I denied what I knew and forced myself to learn a different way of thinking, like learning a new language. I could speak it, but I was never fluent, and I knew it wasn't my true way of thinking. Now I understand that my true vision and thinking were right all along, and I will never reject them again. It's better to be completely alone, because, if I'm honest, it is really wonderful to be alone and be true human self. When I talk about all this, it might sound harsh, as if I came from a tough background, but I didn't. It's just the reality of how the world truly operates. Narcissistic abuse helped me finally recognize my true self, the inner child who saw and understood the truth long before I began suppressing it to fit in with narcissistic norms. It's both bizarre and true. It reveals everything about the world, not just highly narcissistic groups, but the so-called normal world too. When I was my kind self, I struggled to make friends. Any friendships that did start were quickly sabotaged by a narcissistic female schoolmate spreading lies about me, causing them to fall apart. Even when I found a group of friends, as my kind self, they turned away because I didn't bring drama and was seen as boring. So, to be liked and accepted, I decided to change. I started talking like others, gossiping, judging, and adding drama. This change helped me gain friends and maintain friendships that lasted. But deep down, I didn't like who I had become. While I was thrilled to finally be accepted and not rejected, it came at the cost of my true personality. At home, I always had to pretend and constantly achieve, striving not to be pushed into insignificance. Deep down, I knew I didn't belong with my family. Family gatherings were never pleasant or safe for me, but I convinced myself I enjoyed them and looked forward to them. The same went for gatherings with extended family. They were actually awful experiences for me, but I forced myself to deny this reality because I felt guilty and thought I was a terrible person for feeling that way. These were typical family gatherings, filled with politics, gossip, religious and patriarchal discussions, scapegoating, and current affairs, just the usual topics people discuss. Back then, I couldn't stand it, but I had to endure. Now, I couldn't bear to attend such gatherings even if I had to. It would make me physically ill or leave me depressed for days afterward. Thankfully, my body now protects me from it for health reasons, and that's a relief. I no longer attend any gatherings. I knew that if I showed my true self to my family, I would be rejected, and that's exactly what happened. For most of my life, I've been avoiding who I really am because I believed the true me wasn't valued in the world I lived in, and it is still true. I acknowledge it and not deny it. However, I've come to realize that I am worthy, in my own world. I've developed a genuine connection with myself, accepting and loving who I truly am. I've decided never again to betray myself just to fit in with others. It's simply not worth it. In many cases, people betray themselves without even realizing it, just as I did unconsciously in the past. Often, they avoid solitude and peaceful environments because facing the truth might bring discomfort. Instead, they immerse themselves in drama, gossip, and scapegoating to maintain a false reality and sustain their false self, giving it energy. Narcissistic abuse has given me a gift. I can no longer force myself to attend family gatherings or social events with friends, even if I wanted to. My body simply won't allow it anymore. I've also started to see that while I used to convince myself I enjoyed these gatherings, most of the time they were actually unhealthy and abusive, and they still are. I created an illusion in my mind to cope and to feel love for the people involved, but the reality was often painful. Before attending, I would experience crippling anxiety, as if my soul wanted to escape from my body. Narcissistic abuse has actually freed me from these relationships. If left to my own devices, I likely wouldn't have made this choice, and I would have stayed stuck in a life where I constantly sought approval, dodged devaluation, and endured mistreatment. This life demanded perpetual overachievement, maintaining an impressive facade, boasting about specific accomplishments, and upholding a certain status. A significant part of my liberation came from leaving religion, an actual act of apostasy that freed me from the psychological and emotional loyalty to the institution and community that had previously blinded me. Leaving religion was a process that lasted over a decade for me, so I was surprised at how freeing the actual act of apostasy was. I had initially thought it was just a matter of paperwork. Instead, it felt like my spirituality was unshackled from ties through the official act of severing myself from that institution and community. It was a firm declaration of my free will, which held real spiritual power. Religion turned out to be the core source of abuse in my life, not just the church, but the actual concept of God and the biblical texts themselves. Religion often presents a kind facade that hides something darker beneath. When I decided to walk away, I initially thought I was leaving behind an institution. However, as I started to read the Bible with clear eyes, free from the blinders of holiness and loyalty, I was stunned by what I discovered. I couldn't believe that I had been willing to defend and even die for ideas and a book that I had never truly read and understood before. The intense fear of questioning religion, God, and doctrines had shaped my perception, forcing me to see only what I needed to survive and avoid punishment. Now, it was clear to me how profoundly narcissistic these ideas and the book itself truly are. And the world is fundamentally based on religions. The world of people is narcissistic. I found myself fleeing from these norms, driven by the hope that one day I would discover a kinder, better place where I could freely express myself, say what I truly felt and thought without adhering to the social or religious scripts imposed upon me to avoid judgment. Narcissists create an illusion of something better, which is why people like me often fall into their traps. We think they are like us, that we finally found what we ourselves have inside. We yearn for a more humane, authentic experience, and narcissists initially seem to embody that. Even stronger narcissistic groups can appear to offer this until they reveal themselves to be even worse than the norms we were trying to escape. What I sought, I now understand, isn't found in mainstream society simply because it requires speaking, thinking, and behaving in a way that preserves inner richness and connection, something incompatible with parasitic and predatory frequencies prevalent there. It's not about being special, rather, It's about nurturing and safeguarding a sense of authenticity that mainstream interactions often dilute or distort. When I conformed to societal expectations, I lost touch with this inner richness. It's not a unique trait, but rather something cultivated and protected to maintain its essence. To preserve this, I choose to interact selectively, staying in superficial exchanges where narcissistic behaviors remain hidden. The allure of belonging with the majority is tempting, but I've learned that beneath the surface lies a world driven by narcissistic tendencies. I embrace my true human essence, even if it means walking a solitary path, as it often does. Finding joy in nature's beauty and appreciating life's simple pleasures, things, concepts, colors, scents, animals, plants, and all the wonders around us, this is where I find fulfillment. These are the things that cannot be experienced fully when one is part of a world consumed by constant drama, gossip, judgment, scapegoating, and other ego-driven pursuits. There are two worlds that mutually exclude each other, and one must choose where they want to be.